Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Football Experience brought to you by On the Pod. We're back to review the Champions League final and hopefully finish our Teams of the Year selection. Caleb, how you doing today?
Not the best. I'm feeling a little bit under the weather. I think the events of the weekend broke me. Maybe that was the final straw. My immune system was holding out for a while, and then I think it gave in. Like how your mood and stuff affects all of that stuff. Well, Sunday wasn't a great day, and I think whatever viruses were around came flooding through my body on the Sunday.
That's
So
it's not good to hear, but I
it's a
can
grim start, but
yeah.
we'll pick up from
Yeah,
here.
way to just start the mood really low, but at least we start with a low bar. Hopefully, finish on a high note. So, look, there's a few talking points that I guess we can discuss. Obviously, in regards to the game, there's a couple of questions that I had for you. There's so many places where we can start, but look, I'm just going to start with sort of where we talked about in the previous pod, where you were trying to allude to this Liverpool team or this Liverpool iteration being the best team over the past 5 years. I tried to push back on that a little bit by saying that how can they be, considering they've only won one domestic league title in those 5 years. So they've been second best in the league for those 5 years, and they've won one European Cup. And you were sort of basing this on the fact that they made, like, you had some criteria with making the final of the of the Champions League specifically 3 times over the past 5 years, winning it once. Unfortunately for Liverpool fans, losing it on Saturday. But the question then is, where do you rank this current Madrid team? We can say over the past 5 years, over the past 10 years, or even all time, because for the core of this team, so that goes, you can sort of argue, I think Carvajal was there for the very first one that Ancelotti won, but he was definitely there for the three under Zidane. Modric was there, Kroos was there, Casemiro was there, Benzema was there. Where do you rank this Madrid team?
So, what am I comparing them to? Am I comparing them to each individual season over, say, each season that they won the Champions League in the last decade, or?
Well, I guess in history, because, like, for instance, for some of these players that, like, for instance, the core of that team that I just named, this is their fifth Champions League as a team. So for Kroos, Modric, Casemiro, Benzema, this is their fifth Champions League. And you can almost could you then compare it to the Real Madrid team that won 5 on the trot back in the 50s, when the competition, you could argue, was a lot easier because there wasn't as many elite teams competing in it. You had some minnows because the competition was formatted differently. So how do you rank them historically, this Madrid team, considering they've won five Champions League titles over the past, is it like 8 years now?
Yeah, and that's what makes it a difficult question, because you're talking about over half, maybe 2/3 of a core of a team that did, no, probably half. Now that I factor every player, it's like half of a core of a team that accomplished unprecedented success in the competition in modern day times. To find the last three-peat, you have to go back to the mid-70s with Bayern, before Real did it in the mid-2010s. And obviously, the whole story before they even repeated was no one had gone back-to-back in the Champions League in the newest form of the European Cup, not since the late 80s Milan team. So if you're asking me about that team that won 13, 14, and then won 3 on a spin, you're more asking me about individuals that are still in the team and the ones that you mentioned. Now, if we're talking about teams, this team for me isn't the same team as the one that three-peated and the one that won the 13-14 before that, because as soon as you lose someone like Cristiano Ronaldo, who was in the prime of his career when he was three-peating in terms of his overall game, the leadership he added and everything like that, I think he was such an integral part as well. When you throw in a Sergio Ramos and you throw in a Rafael Varane and you throw in a Keylor Navas, for me, the team's identity isn't the same. Although I take your point about the midfield being exactly the same, so they understand that. But I think Casemiro's job has somewhat changed a little bit. While he did it back in those teams to an extent, he's had to take on a bigger load in terms of protecting and filling in gaps in that back four, because I think probably Varane and Ramos were more adept at being centre backs really, and organising around them a little bit more and covering those spaces compared to what essentially is a new defensive unit behind him. So when you're asking me about this team, if I'm comparing them football wise to previous iterations of themselves, I say that this team is worse, but their accomplishment is as good as anything that those teams in the 2010s accomplished. Because to have, like we were talking about on the last pod, to have such a remarkably tough run to the final, to beat 4 of the 5 best teams in Europe, and to really come from nowhere to win the Champions League. Because I was doing a little bit of a dive into the odds, and after the group stage, I believe they were the 7th favourite, and they were still behind teams like Ajax and Man United at that time, after the group stage in the betting odds. So they came from, 7th or 8th position to come in and win this. What an incredible achievement, and the way they did it will live long in the memory. But if you're asking me on football terms whether I think this team is better than anything they had in the 2010s, I don't believe so. I'd have to do a deeper dive into that 5 in a row, because I know the core would have stayed the same. It would be interesting to see how much of that team around it changed during that winning 5 in a row, which is incredible. I know the European Cup is easier and harder to win in a lot of ways, because obviously you need to be the league champion or the defending champion of the European Cup to be in the next season's competition. But then when you're there, it's a lot thinner. You're only playing a round of 16, then a quarterfinal, and then so on. So it's, for me, it's apples. It's pros and cons. It's give and take. But yeah, this team, while the team, because of sort of instances or examples I've sort of said in the past where they've played however many, like 680 minutes of football, and they've maybe been the better team over that span for maybe 90 minutes. So this team, in a footballing perspective, I don't put in historically great context, but the achievement, right up there, maybe in terms of an underdog achievement in this competition, the best I've seen since Porto for me. Maybe Liverpool the next season, but yeah, if you look at those champions, I don't think you could get, the last huge underdog we had was probably Chelsea in 2011-12, but that's still Chelsea. So how much of an underdog can they really be? This is still Real Madrid, I guess. So how much of an underdog can they be? But you look at the way the season unraveled or unfolded. Really good achievement. So I guess that's a roundabout way of answering that. I don't know where you would put them if you've been thinking about that for you. And I guess I want to address the Liverpool point after that as well. Yeah, I'm interested to get your thoughts.
Well, if we're talking just this team specifically, like this iteration, I think they get beat by the Barca team from 08-09, and that Barca, I guess, yeah, okay, so the 08-09 winners, Barca, and they get beat by the 2010-2011 Barca as well. They definitely get beat by that, was it 14-15 Barca? So those Barca iterations, for me, are a better team, and I believe that they would win 7 or 8 times out of 10 against this specific Real Madrid team, because as we've addressed, they during certain points of the competition they were 7th or 8th best team or favourites to win the competition. And the previous iterations, that three-peat team would blow this one out of the water. Like, if you could clone the players and so on, like, they would, like, because that team as well, they were a lot younger, they were a lot more energetic, and they obviously had the Ronaldo factor as well. And I think the centre-backs would be better as well in Ramos and Varane. Courtois, we'll get onto him. I think he is a better keeper than Navas, but Navas obviously, he doesn't get the respect that he deserves, unfortunately. But yeah,
agreed.
I think that if you look at it over the past, if you go over the past 10 years, and considering the core of this team is the same, they haven't changed the team much. Like, for instance, the Barcelona team that won in 2014, 2015, who's left there? Only Piqué and Alba, and Ter Stegen. So they only have 3 players, or Busquets. So 4.
Busquets.
Yeah, they have 4 players left. Whereas this team, they have 5 or 6 players left, and the 5 or 6 of the starting 11 as well. I'm pretty sure Carvajal was there for that first one with Ancelotti. He was definitely there for the three-peat. But yeah, like I think the overall core, and Courtois was there for the three-peat as well, but he wasn't the starting keeper. Navas was. So the core of the team has remained the same. So their achievement as you could sort of say, could you say dynasty? I think it ranks right up there, and I think it goes, like, if you want to compare, if you want to weight it equally, I know that you can't, but if you want to weight the achievement equally, I think it's similar to that first 5-peat of the Real Madrid team of the 50s. Because obviously we mentioned, like, there's alluded to, there's pros and cons as to that 5-peat, but I think it goes up there, considering that the core of this team has won 5 championships in the past 8 or 9 years.
Yeah, I think that's fair if we're talking over that span of time. I guess them winning this one has somewhat prolonged that span, because, like you say, I use the 5-year intervals, 3 finals in 5 years, and this kind of what I saw when you look at the list of winners, kind of what you see in the mid '80s, where Liverpool win another one. I think in '83, to sort of just expand from what they were doing in the late '70s, and maybe still be the more dominant team on the continent. Because I guess when you look at it, Real Madrid still made a semi-final last season as well. So it's not like they've been in the wilderness for that time. So while I was looking at Liverpool making the 3 finals, and I guess this will transition into talking on the flip side. But yeah, this sort of just prolongs that period that you look at this phase of European football as a 10-year spell for Real Madrid, and I definitely agree that it's a fantastic accomplishment by the core group of players. Like I say, it'll be interesting to see what the differences between this and that initial 5-peat were, in terms of the team, how much it changed over those 5 years, but. Because obviously we've touched on the fact that a lot of this core, it's half the core, because we can't like, it's the 2 centre backs and it's the goalkeeper, which is important, but then there's the Ronaldo factor. So people are in different roles now. Benzema is the Ronaldo, and obviously what a job that he did. And honestly, if it was, I don't know, Vinicius has had a really good season, so he should have played. I guess we should maybe touch on the game a little bit, but just on the flip side, to touch on the Liverpool factor, it was a question I wanted to ask as well when you were talking about that Barcelona team. If you think that, we'll take the 14-15 team, for example. So you think that they could beat this Real Madrid team 7 out of 10 times in a one-off game? Was that right?
Minimum, yes.
Minimum, I think that's a little high, but seven seems a bit right. If you go up to 8 and stuff, I'd probably dispute that because I think that sells this Real Madrid team a little bit short. But anyway, seven. How many times do you think that Barcelona team would beat this Liverpool team?
Well, I know we're getting into the game, and I do say that this Liverpool team are the superior team to Real Madrid. So I'd say maybe 5 or 6. I still think that Barca team was or is better than this Liverpool team.
And so, have you taken draws out of the equation when you say 5 or 6?
I'm taking draws out, so like they don't.
So if they win 6, Liverpool win the other 4. There's no
There's
draws
no
in the
draws.
other.
No, you don't play for
Yeah.
draws. No.
No, yeah, I think that's fair. If you said 6-4, I think I wouldn't disagree with that. If you said 50-50, I would disagree with that. So, and in that kind of lies my point that look, and obviously it's going to sound like sour grapes, and I'm not trashing Real Madrid because I think we just spend the time applauding the accomplishments, but in the game and throughout the season, and it goes back to what we're arguing about on the last pod actually, because that could have had a factor on how this went. But while I acknowledge how tough Real's path to the final was, I still think even just watching the games and watching the level of dominance that Liverpool were able to have over opponents, um, and just even and you inherently agree because you think that Barca team would only, unless you're getting into matchups, but if we're just getting on purely who's a good team and who's the better team and whatnot, then you agree that this Liverpool team would be a better matchup historically for that great Barca team as well. So and in the game that I thought they were the better team except for the 20 minutes, but Real Madrid capitalised on their 20 minutes. But now this Liverpool team, I think we're playing to have that 5 year spell in the history books be theirs. And in losing this final, you just can't say it is. It's like when I was talking about it, they're more on the level of the Man United team from 07 to 12 and the Bayern team from 09 to 14 that made 3 finals in those spells. They're not historically great teams. You'll look back and you'll say, hey, they were very good teams, but they're not exclamation mark teams. They're not your Real from the late 50s. They're not Bayern in the mid 70s. They're not Ajax in the early 70s. They're not even Liverpool in the late 70s and early 80s. They're not those teams. I feel like you need to win at least 2 of them when you get into it. And it's unfortunate because this is what a final is, and it's a one-off game. Real Madrid had key performers play fantastically well in the right areas of the pitch, but you also got to acknowledge that when you come under that kind of pressure, that on another day, Thibaut Courtois gets less of a fingertip onto that. It goes into the back of the net, or Mo Salah puts his finish just a little bit wide. So, like, you are playing the luck game when you aren't the better team, so to speak. But the thing I always believe in, sort of philosophically, is winning football can't be bad football. Like, you can't play, you can't be a poor team and win a competition like this. It's just it's impossible. You have to have done something right, and I guess Real Madrid just showed again the resilience, and then they showed the monster performance from defensive players, mainly Courtois and Casemiro, even though the 2 centre backs were fantastic as well. But they were just able to show that side of themselves, and their 15 to 20 minute period at the start of the second half was all they really needed. Maybe that little 5 minute period at the end of the first half, and I suppose we'll talk about that instance. But yeah, definitely 2 things can be true. Real Madrid can have the most amazing achievement that I can remember in recent history in terms of their journey to the final and winning it. Could be one of the least deserving winners in recent times because if you use your eye test and you look at the games in totality, I think most people would agree that they were second best for the majority of pretty much all of them. Maybe the Chelsea one was a little 50-50, but let's not forget they got soundly beaten at the Bernabeu in that second leg. So I don't want to take that away from him, because it's hard not to like this team as well when you see Ancelotti being interviewed and you see the run Benzema's been on, and the way Vinicius has been able to announce his arrival as one of the best young players in the world. Full credit. But two things can be true is what I'm trying to say about that.
Well, we'll get into the game now. Like, we spent a little bit on, I guess, historics and stuff like that. But in regards to the game, I'll just give my quick thoughts. I do agree with you where I think Liverpool, if you go just over the totality of the 90 minutes, I can't say they were like necessarily the superior team and like the dominant team. I wouldn't use those words to really describe the performance, but I think they were the deserving team to at least win, I guess, over the totality of the 90 minutes. If you're looking at it from an attacking perspective, because from a defensive perspective, Real Madrid played really well and they seemed to nullify or stifle chances. I know like the stat sheet, I think at one point it was like 20 chances for Liverpool and like 2 or 3 for Real Madrid at one point, around like the 70th or 80th minute. So, but the performance that Courtois put in, especially some of the saves, like I think in the 20th minute, tipping that Mane shot onto the post. I think even he said that was the most important save of the game, because if you guys went up in that 20th minute that early, it would have forced Real Madrid to push further up instead of playing a lower block, and it would have opened up more space for your forwards, and then it could have been a run of like 3 or 4 goals, because that's what you guys have done throughout the season. Like, you overrun teams. But I didn't necessarily see that dominance and that assertion. Like, when the only thing that I really saw was like when Real Madrid did have the ball, they were sort of pinned back in their defensive third, or even up to their middle third. They couldn't seem to attack too much. And Konate, and it was interesting, it wasn't really Vinicius versus Trent Alexander-Arnold. It was always Vinicius versus Henderson or Vinicius versus Konate. Alexander-Arnold would sort of be the second defender. He wouldn't be that first line of defense when Vinicius did get the ball. And yeah, I think overall it was a very well executed plan by Ancelotti, because he knew that his team wasn't the superior team, and Real Madrid just showed their experience, I guess, in defending and trying to play around you guys. And it just seemed like, I think you guys played 63 or 64 games throughout the season, literally every single game of the season, bar the Community Shield. And I think it seemed to show. It seemed to show that, especially for your forward line, they were sort of blunt or deflated in an energy sort of perspective. They weren't necessarily on that form that they were a couple of weeks ago. And that chance from Salah as well, that Courtois got his forearm onto, I think Salah pre-AFCON would have buried that. And yeah, like that's what I seem to take away from it, that you guys just weren't really effective in the box. And I've heard other managers, especially Arteta, talk about it. Like, especially when he's faced Liverpool, like, the difference was the 18-yard box, where Arsenal didn't put their chances away, but Liverpool did. And this was sort of one of those things where Liverpool couldn't put their chances away, and the one chance that fell to, or the one of, I guess, 3 or 4 chances that fell to Real Madrid, they put their one chance away. And before I hand it over to you, just to give your analysis, and I want you to also address this, but do you think there needs to be a rule change on the offside ruling regarding where the goalkeeper's positioning when he comes off his line and defenders then, or a defender then comes back to try and defend the goal line. If you know what I'm talking about, we can go into more detail in regards to that once you, I guess, give your analysis.
Well, we could go into that now. I don't think it will make a huge difference. I always kind of enjoy seeing those offside decisions when a goalkeeper's in front of the player, because a lot of people would think, oh, it's onside because there's a player in between. But obviously, the rule is you've got to have two. So I always think it's a little bit of a fun anomaly. But if you were to change the rules, I don't think it would really impact me that much. I wouldn't really care. Because you don't see it that often, really, do you? That a goalkeeper's in front of a striker or an opposition player to make them offside. So for that one, I don't know if you felt strongly about it just before I go into what I saw in the game, but yeah, for that one, I wouldn't really feel strongly one way or the other.
I've seen it. I think I've seen it about 3 or 4 times this season. I think I've seen it like once in the Champions League and like 2 or 3 times in the Premier League. And I think it's a ridiculous rule, because if the goalkeeper is coming off his line, he should not have that insurance policy behind him. He should be punished for coming off his line. I think that rule should be changed, and they need to work around that, because I know, you said the rule is that the attacking player, like I think the specific ruling is the attacking player needs to have two defensive players to not be considered offside, and obviously that's one defender plus the goalkeeper. And if you then, in the 18-yard box, it can come to those situations where the goalkeeper comes to the penalty spot. So he comes off his line, and then, 1 or 2 defenders then come to the goal line to try and act like second goalkeepers to try and, defend the ball. And in those instances where 2 defenders go in behind, then there's 2 defenders on the line, it's not going to be offside. But I personally think it needs to be changed in those instances where only 1 defender is able to get back onto the line, and that the goalkeeper needs to be punished in those situations.
Fair enough. I don't think it should have even gone to that point, because I believe it was might have been Allison who played it onto Canate, or was it Canate who played it onto Fabinho? But I thought it clearly came off Liverpool players, even though it was deflected there. But it was deflected off a pass that we played anyway. So when I look back at it, I think the goal should have stood. And, it would have been better for Benzema's numbers and stuff, and his percentage of what the goals he scored for Real Madrid would have been. And probably fitting if he scored the winner, especially if Real are going to go on and win it anyway, because I thought at the end of the first half it was like football karma, because I thought that was our most dominant period, and I'll touch on that in a minute. But it was our most dominant period, and then I guess that goal was disallowed because Real didn't really deserve it. But then I guess Real had the most dominant period at the start of the second half and scored their goal.
I think Valverde got a toe to it and then hit it into Allison, which then deflected into Canate or whoever, and then it came
maybe.
to Benzema. That's what happened.
I missed that. I thought.
Yeah.
I thought it was a Liverpool player who played it in. Look, it was such a subjective decision. I guess the on-field decision was offside anyway. So see, I wouldn't want to see that be reviewed for so long. That's my only gripe with it. I mean, if it takes that long, just go with on-field decision. Just go with what was decided on that moment, because it's not a clear and obvious error if you have to look at it for that long. That's a little thing that I definitely want to see change. I think we should have a timer on VAR, and if you can't overturn it within that time frame, then go with on-field, because it's just not. And that goes for offsides as well. I hate getting the lines out. It's just too much. Let's use clear and obvious for offside as well. I mean, and then you don't need to set the bar, because the bar is, hey, you've got 30 seconds to look at 2 full speed replays at it. If you can't come to a decision that that's clear and obvious error, it's not a clear and obvious error, and we'll go with what was what was done on field, and let's make the referees referee games again, for God's sakes. I mean, it's gotten a bit out of hand. But anyway, like the game, I completely agree with pretty much your summation of it. Liverpool, I don't think had the energy to put in what they wanted to put in, particularly in the first half. They played a more, and they've done it all season. They played a tactical game with the energy conservation or their use of energy throughout the game. So first half just reeked to me of, it was Liverpool playing at a high intensity and playing quite well, being a little bit sloppy here and there, but I think it was them not wanting to commit as many men forward as they might usually, because I think they still wanted legs to go at it in the second half. And to be fair to them, there was maybe 5-10 minutes where they were a little bit in shock. And obviously you would be in shock conceding that goal in the second half. You know that you don't have the luxury of going back in for half time and regrouping. So you've got to regroup on the fly. And they took a punch in the mouth, and it took them 5-10 minutes to get back into the game. But once they got back into the game, I think they put an adequate amount of pressure on Real Madrid to just say, look, it just wasn't our night. I mean, it wasn't a sort of instance, say even, for example, Man City scoring in the second half, a similar time to what Real scored here, but in the second half of that game at the Bernabeu against Real Madrid, I didn't think Real Madrid's response to that punch warranted them getting 2 goals. Whereas if I saw Liverpool's response to that punch in the mouth last, or in the Champions League final, I think it warranted at least 1 goal. But alas, it just wasn't their night. Thibaut Courtois was an absolute monster. I wasn't too impressed with his interview after the match, and I get it, it's after the match. He was literally still on the pitch. But I'm never a big fan of the vindication sort of responses to questions like, oh, nobody in England believes in me, or I don't get the credit I'm due in England. It's like, well, all right, if you want to start saying that, let's hear the names for the people who you think have disrespected you, because come on, man, anyone who watches football knows you're a really good goalkeeper. You had a dip from what your standards were at Atletico and Chelsea, but now you're right back at it and you're one of the world's best. So I don't know. I'm never a fan of those vindication, but I guess these are players. They use what they need to motivate them, and whatever he used worked a treat, because he was absolutely fantastic. And Casemiro, who I'll talk a little bit more about later in the pod as we go through our teams, but he was just a monster. He clogged up every gap. So physical in there, was everywhere. And then Militao played one of his best games in the knockout stage of the Champions League. And Alaba was really solid as well. And Danny Carvajal, who had been shaky up until this point, was just a monster. I mean, the monster is the right word, because these guys were so tenacious, and they really didn't give Liverpool anything. And I guess in the first half, ideally, if you look back, the only regret you could have is, could Liverpool have turned the screw a little bit more in that first half? Could they have committed a few more men into the box and, yeah, you know what, maybe left themselves a little bit open to a counter? But it's the way they've played all season. Could they have got more balls into the box and applied more pressure to the second balls like they always do in the counter press? And could they have really pushed for that goal? But again, I can't criticize. I can't criticize this team, and they performed how they in a way that would make Liverpool fans acknowledge and say that was a decent performance. It just wasn't our night. So it was a sickening blow, because obviously I'd been talking. That's the one you want to win. I feel if you're an elite European club, you want to win the Champions League, and we had a chance to do it, and they don't come around all that often. So a sickening blow in that sense, but they played the game. I think they played the right game, and they just didn't get the right result.
Now, one question I have for you as a Liverpool fan, and I've seen some of on the other talk shows and stuff, like Liverpool fans calling in, and I've seen some fans say that this season is a failure for Liverpool. Like, what's your take on that?
It's not a failure. You can't win 2 trophies and play every game competitive. You can't put yourself in that with the chance to win everything right up until the end and call any season like that a failure. But obviously, with the fact that in the last week we had 2 trophies that were right in front of our face, and the 2 major ones that you go into any season wanting to win. The Premier League was easier to swallow because it was never ours. It was never ours from this whole calendar year. It was never in our possession at the end of any match week, and even during the last day, it was never ours. So that one was a little bit easier. I think you applaud the effort to even get back in with the chance of doing that. And then, I mean, obviously, we gave ourselves a chance. City just snatched it. Well, they gave it to us and then they snatched it back. And the Champions League, this is what finals are. They're one-off games. When you're playing with 2 teams that, even though we acknowledge and we believe that Real Madrid are quite as good at the footballing team as Liverpool, they're still easily a good enough team to win in a one-off game. So, look, that's just the nature of finals. So it's disappointing, yes, but a failure, no, not for me.
Okay, and the other, I guess, the follow-up question to that is, and I know we'll, since we're now heading into the transfer season, we're going to have actual episodes where we address this to a larger extent. But after 330 minutes of finals football, if my maths is correct, so the Carabao Cup and the FA Cup and now the Champions League, Liverpool have failed to score a goal this year in a cup final. What is one signing, or who is one signing that could, I guess, change those fortunes? Like, do you need another forward? Do you need an actual number 9? Or do you need a more creative midfielder? Or what's one signing that's top priority on the list that probably could have changed your fortunes? Maybe to not have forced you to extra time and penalties against Chelsea twice, and then also possibly could have helped create. You guys created plenty of chances, but maybe contributed with a goal from midfield or something like that. I don't know. What's one signing that you think is top priority? We saw Man City sign Haaland before, pretty much had that deal wrapped up before the transfer window opened. So, as an example.
That's hard to say, and I'm not in the business of predicting specifically Liverpool transfer targets or whoever they might, because for me, I gave up on that a long time when they were signing your Sadio Manes and your Mo Salahs and players like that, and even this season, Luis Diaz, who obviously are all very good players, and you've heard of them, but I mean, they wouldn't be in the forefront of your mind as Liverpool signing, especially now. I get back in those days with the Salah and the Mane. We couldn't swim in the biggest ponds, but maybe now we would have the opportunity, but I don't think the wage structure would allow that. So if you're talking realistic, the first player and who I would want, who's not realistic, would be a Robert Lewandowski type. A type who doesn't necessarily make your overall team performance better over the season, but who can be in the positions to make the decisive contribution in games like that. But again, his wages, I don't think will allow that, even though obviously we've now heard the report that Sadio Mane will be leaving in the summer. We'll see how that one shapes up, because nothing that you see in reports is 100%. But and obviously you've been touting it for a while, the Bayern connection. So if there was a possibility to maybe do a swap deal there, if I was involved at Liverpool, I would be looking into that strongly. And the other position, there's 2 positions. Is that it's that to an extent, because I think we need a different dynamic in the front line. We don't need another forward. We need a striker. We need a number 9. And the other position has to be a little bit more depth in central midfield, because while the three who started were really good: Henderson, Thiago, and Fabinho, and that's the favoured starting midfield. But I mean, Hendo's not getting any younger, and when he plays in that central midfield role, he's asked to do a lot of running, a lot more box to box work. So how much longer can he do that to an effective level? And the Liverpool midfielder profile, and while Thiago's bucked the trend a little bit, but he adds the creativity. So you're hoping that your Harvey Elliott's and your Curtis Jones has come into the fold a little bit more over the years, although Curtis Jones has been hit and miss after making a really good breakthrough sort of the last 2 seasons. Harvey Elliott started the season really well. So you're hoping that while we don't expect Thiago to play every game, we expect him to hopefully be fit for the big games. And then you're hoping that Jones and Elliott can carry the load behind him in terms of creativity from midfield. But on the other side, I don't want, when Henderson's out or when Henderson has to play holding midfield, I don't really want it to be Naby Keita in there anymore. You can't have a Naby Keita next to a Thiago either side of a Fabinho. I just don't think it gives you enough physicality for the way Liverpool play. Liverpool need a more intimidating presence in there. And a player I'd probably be looking at who could do the Henderson role, but in a slightly different way, would probably be a Sergej Milinkovic-Savic or someone like that. I think someone who's really physical but can add goals from midfield, and can link up more with the front men, because while Hendo can get forward and link up by doing his overlapping runs down that side, he doesn't really have the variety of being able to go into a number 10 sort of position and play between lines. But while Milinkovic-Savic isn't great at that, he can drive the ball through the central spaces, but as well he can arrive into the box and offer that aerial threat. And if you were to play maybe as the left-sided central midfielder with Trent delivering that delivery, I think that would be a valuable tool. So everywhere else, I think we're pretty solid. Maybe a better right backup for Trent. Depends if Gomez stays, because I think he's been solid there, and he could obviously be versatile in centre back. So yeah, I think the squad's pretty solid, but they're the two sort of different dimensions that I would be looking to add in those positions for Liverpool.
I think I'd agree with you especially on the midfield point. I slightly disagree on the Thiago characterization, because although he's seen as a creative midfielder, for me, he's seen as sort of like the Pirlo type creative midfielder, where he creates from deep. He doesn't necessarily, at least I haven't seen him do it that much, where he drives with the ball and gets into the box. He usually just hangs, when you guys are playing in and around the box, he doesn't get in there. He sort of stays 20, 25 yards out to collect any balls that sort of are cleared out, and then he resets and restarts the play again. And you gave a shout out to Savage, because he can arrive into the box and he can score goals from midfield. And like the first name that came to mind, obviously you're never going to get him, is De Bruyne. Like someone like him, where he can drive with the ball into the box, he can deliver balls as well. He can arrive late as well and deliver 10 to 15 goals per season. A player like that, because Thiago doesn't do that for you, and Henderson, it doesn't really do that for you guys either. Like, from what I've seen of Henderson, he seems to sort of try to play those triangles with Trent a lot, and he doesn't really get into the box that much at all. So you guys don't have that type of midfielder, so I think that would be a top priority for you guys, more so than a Lewandowski. But Lewandowski, or like a Lewandowski type player or type number 9, I guess would be, like from a neutral looking at it, would be a second priority, whereas a midfielder, a driving midfielder, would be a first priority.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the priorities also stem on the Sadio Mane factor. I mean, if we are going to lose him in the summer, then a forward becomes a priority again, and maybe that's your opportunity to bring in that kind of forward who can add a different dimension. I mean, one name I even mentioned to Matthias when we were watching the game was Ciro Immobile. I mean, yeah, I don't think he'd cost you the earth and the moon, and I think he's a willing runner and he's a striker, and I don't think you'd have to bring him in and you'd have to give him game time, because I think you could keep the dynamic of the front three pretty similar without breaking it up too much. But then you have the option of having someone who is more hungry to just look for goals. In those moments, maybe an option to go 4-2-3-1 like they did to close out the game against Real. So I don't think, because obviously I don't think we're going to get a world class striker because of the wage structure at Liverpool. So like I would love to get a Harry Kane or a Lewandowski. I just don't think that's going to happen, especially with Tottenham making top four, obviously. But yeah, I can't see that happening. So maybe you have to look outside the box a little bit. And another one from Serie A who I don't think is quite ready, but I threw his name out as well, is Tammy Abraham, who I think has been pretty fantastic for Roma this season. But obviously, I think it will take another season of him doing that and doing it at a little bit of a higher level, even though they still don't have Champions League football. But I've been really impressed with what I've seen of him under Mourinho. So that could be one to look for in the future. But it might even be one to look at now, because, again, it's a player. I don't think he'd be willing to come if he's not going to get a certain percentage of game time, but it's a player you don't have to really break up the dynamic of what was so, I guess, successful this season in giving you a chance to win all 4 trophies, a legitimate chance. So it's that balancing act as well. Like, how much do you react to what has happened and you not winning the Premier League and the Champions League title this season? How much do you react or overreact, or do you just run it back? Do you try to do everything you can to keep Sadio Mane and just run it back for another season, maybe add that one midfielder? Because I think I agree. If we can keep the whole front line together, then the midfielder who can add a different dimension would be key priority.
Look, if you wanna win the Champions League next season, just send a couple of your scouts to Croatia, and that will keep the traditional superstition going. So, and I did drop that tidbit.
The streak is still alive.
The streak is still there. So, I think Bayern they have a couple of Croatians playing for them. I can't really think of any other top teams that have Croatians playing for them. Obviously, Chelsea, I don't really put them as favourites or up there really to win Champions League, especially after losing like half their back line. But yeah, maybe you guys should send some of your scouts here. I'll show them around.
Oh man!
And look, I think that's a perfect way to, I guess, move off of the Champions League final and, I guess, wrap up our teams of the season. Look, I actually after the final, I actually had a look at my team, and I don't want to I don't think there's any players that I really want to change. Like, you could probably, I know for me, I put Casemiro in Team 3, and he could potentially move up to Team 2 or even Team 1, but I don't want to base my teams off of just one game, especially a final. And we can both agree this final was very tentative. It was it wasn't a really exciting final. So then both teams were a little bit cautious, I guess. It is the biggest final that comes around every year. So I'm not going to change any of my players based off of this one game, and this is based on the totality of the season. So did you want to do Team 2, or did you want me to, I guess, do my Team 2?
So as soon as you're finished up with your little spiel about not changing anyone based on this position, I must admit I've got to clean up a little bit of housekeeping and do a little bit of a change myself, because last time we talked about the teams, I put Courtois in the third team. Well, I just have to bump him up to the second team after being man of the match in a Champions League final. And I feel for the guy on the receiving end who now gets bumped down to the third team, but I mean, after that performance from Courtois, how could you not at least have him in first or second team? So he gets bumped up to be my second team goalkeeper. The player I had there before the final was Mike Mignon from AC Milan, who came in to replace Donnarumma this season, and caught my eye in the tie at Anfield in the group stage. Saved the Mo Salah penalty in there, and then from then on, in every time I watched him and AC Milan play, he was so solid. Has pulled off so many good saves this season. I think he finished the season with I think maybe 19 clean sheets, 17 or 19 clean sheets in Serie A. Took the Golden Glove. But after what Courtois did in the Champions League final, I had to bump him down to third team. So my second team goalkeeper is Courtois. With the second team, I chose to play in a 3-4-3 to allow maybe a variety of players to succeed in different roles. In my wing backs for both teams, and arguably they probably play better as wing backs, or they do already play as wing backs, but not for their club side, obviously. But I've got both Trent and Andy Robertson as right and left wing back. I think it's pretty easy to see that their qualities would translate to be wing backs. Second and third assist getters in the Premier League, which is just remarkable considering they're both fullbacks, only behind Mo Salah in that category. And obviously just so crucial to the creativity of Liverpool. Trent has, this season in particular, shown to have another weapon in his arsenal in terms of making underlapping runs and going and supplementing the central midfielders. But he always seems to find an angle to deliver a good cross into the box. Can bend his crosses or shape his delivery both ways, which is something that David Beckham could do fantastically back in the day. Hitting that right footer with a bit of cut spin to make it swerve the other way, or bending it behind a defence from a deep cross from 40 yards or something. It's just a remarkable range of passing that I guess playing in right back often gives him space to do that. But he is, along with Thiago, and I would say probably above Thiago, as Liverpool's best passer in terms of trying to probe into behind and put crosses in. And then Robertson on the other side, I mean, just a machine. The engine that the guy has, gets up and down. Obviously, he's got someone caught out in the Champions League final, but does his defensive work fantastically well, and then has enough energy to join into attacks often. So yeah, for the assist numbers and the creativity they offer, arguably what has been the best team in Europe this season. I thought second team. They probably have arguments to be first team, but all of these players probably do. So they're my wing backs. Across the back three, I went with Rudiger, Diaz, and Koulibaly. Rudiger, who I think, was really on my mind to put in the first team, but the only thing, and I keep harking on back to it, but I'm not entirely convinced until I see a centre back who normally plays in a back three playing a back four. I'm just not completely convinced. But having said that, I believe he could do it to a very high level. So that will be interesting to see if he is asked to do that at Real Madrid next season. It'll be interesting to see if he cracks into the team, because now how do you drop Militao and Alaba after accomplishing what they've accomplished this season? So that will be very interesting in itself. But this season at Chelsea, particularly the first probably 2/3 of the season, where Chelsea was still right up there in terms of being one of the best teams in Europe, I think he was fantastic. He's such aggression in stepping out from that back three and putting on pressure onto any attacker who wanted to take up spaces in there, and really cut down on his mistakes. Probably the tail end of last season and the start of this season. That was one thing that I always held against him a little bit. He was a little bit error prone, but this season I think he's shown better discipline, I guess, but he's done this really important thing. I think I said it about Luis Diaz a few weeks ago. He's done the really important thing of finding the right balance between being very aggressive but doing it with the right amount of discipline. So he gets into my second team. Ruben Diaz. I mean, that Man City defense was so good all season. The best defense in the Premier League. One of the best defenses in Europe. Showed that they could get jobs done in different ways with their performance in the second leg of the quarterfinal at the Wanda. And for the most part, their performance at the Bernabeu until it all fell apart at the end. So, and he's just such an important organizer, an important leader. His positional sense is fantastic, can play with the ball. And like I said the other week, I think he's, 23, 24, whatever he is. He's so young. And so I had to have, I have another defender from City in the first team, but I had to have Diaz in at least second team. Just the only knock was that second leg at the Bernabeu and the fact that he gave away the crucial penalty. I mean, that's probably the main thing that's knocked him down. If City make the Champions League final, I think he gets into first team. If he doesn't get injured for the run-in, he probably gets into first team as well. So slightly harsh, but I mean, Hakimi missed out on all three teams because of the way he performed in the second leg against Real Madrid. So I had to knock him a little bit. And finally, I have Koulibaly from Napoli, who I've been an admirer of for so long. Just a really, really strong defender. I think putting him next to a Virgil van Dijk would be unreal. But I mean, the way Konate's played, he made your third team. So, Liverpool already have a sort of player like that. But this guy's the OG in terms of that stuff. And the leadership, being captain of that Napoli side who challenged for the title for so long. That Napoli side had the equal best defense in Serie A, and he for me is the biggest part of that. And yeah, I've just been an admirer of him for so long. It was nice to see him have a relatively injury-free season and get back to playing somewhat his best and helping that Napoli team get back into the Champions League next season. So yeah, he had to make my third team. And then my two midfielders playing in the whatever you want to call it, 3-4-3. I've gone for Declan Rice and Bernardo Silva. Rice, particularly for the first 2/3 of the season, again similar to Rudiger, just unreal. Really playing football at an elite level. Covered so much ground. Body positioning in terms of receiving the ball. You wouldn't look at a Declan Rice and think this guy's like awesome on the ball, but just his functionality in terms of being able to receive balls now and be comfortable to play in that midfield area has really helped him take his game on to the next level. I don't even need to say anything about his physicality. He's such a big presence in that midfield. And obviously West Ham went on a somewhat historic European run in the Europa League and a really great finish to finish in the Conference League. I mean, it would have been nice to see him snatch that Europa League place from United on the last day, but they weren't able to do it, just ran out of steam a little bit. He ran out of steam a little bit towards the end of the season, but fantastic season. And if you want to factor in the Euro stuff, him and Calvin Phillips are a massive part of that England team that made the Euro final. So a great season. I think it was fair to reward him with a second team spot. And Bernardo Silva, who I've been raving about ever since we pretty much started the podcast. What a motor, what a transformation to turn from. I know we'd seen him play central midfield in previous seasons as well, but this season I feel like he became an out and out central midfielder. And the transformation to do that at his frame, to do that from the wing, is just fantastic. But the thing that I've admired the most, and it's a little bit like Declan Rice, and it's why I've played in a 3-4-3 with this team, is his motor. I mean, his energy to be in all places on the pitch at once is just incredible. And I think he's had a fantastic season and was arguably City's second most important player this season. So it was, and he was very close to first team, but I eventually just settled on him being second team. And the only other player, so here's where the discussion begins, because the only other player I have as a cemented second teamer is Son Heung-min, who obviously finished level for the Golden Boot of the Premier League on 23 goals with Salah, no penalties, which obviously everyone loves talking about. So many left-footed goals when you think about his season, which is a remarkable feat. A little bit like Kevin De Bruyne at Wolves. It's just his ability to do it off both sides, his link up with Harry Kane, and him just being, along with Kane, the main driving force to this Tottenham resurgence under Conte, while a few other players like Bentancur and Romero have come along quite nicely, and even Lloris. But him and Kane have just been fantastic. And I just had to put Son one team higher than Kane because of just the Golden Boot, the sheer number of goals that he was able to get. So he's been a fantastic player for a number of seasons now, and yeah, I feel like it's fair that he gets into at least second team. So I don't know if you have your whole second team, if you wanted to talk about that now, and then we could get into the question, because I have 4 players for 2 spots in the first team, and the players who miss out will go automatically into those last 2 spots in second team. So I don't know if you wanted to build suspense, and you could give us your second team now, or if you had anything you wanted to say about my second team so far.
No, it's a pretty solid second team, and I think some of our players, by the sounds of it, are overlapping as well.
Yeah.
Well, if yours, look, let's go for this suspense narrative, and look, I can give my second team, and goalkeeper is Courtois, and I had him as my second team goalkeeper. I had this team ready to go 2 weeks ago when we first started, or a week ago when we first started. So this was pre last match day of the season, and also pre Champions League final, obviously. And like I already said, I don't want to move players based off of 1 or 2 games. I want to try to do it over the totality of the season. So I got Courtois as my second team goalkeeper. Like you, I have Trent and Robertson in as my fullbacks. But I'm going for a 4-3-3 rather than your 3-4-3. So I got Trent and Robinson there, and like you said, where they're pretty much they were what, the 2 of the 3 top assist deliveries in the Premier League, and it's amazing that, like, generally one player hogs the assists for a team. Like, they get 15 assists, and then like the next highest is like maybe 8 or so. Like, they don't get into double figures, but to have both fullbacks get to double figures it's absolutely amazing. And Trent more so is on the attacking side, like probably not more on the defensive, but I think like having that balance between Robertson and Trent, it's similar to, I'm trying to think back, but it's like, you know when something's on the tip of your tongue or just in the front of your mind, but you can't really think about. Oh, all right, yeah, it's similar to Barcelona when they had Dani Alves on the right, but they had Abidal on the left. And Abidal would get forward, but he'd be the more defensive of the 2. So you'd have him sort of sit in the 3. But I guess Liverpool don't necessarily play to that extent, where Robertson plays, sort of tucks in to have 3 centre-backs and lets like Robertson bomb forward, Trent bomb forward. But it sort of is similar to that, where Trent is given more permission to, I guess, play forward, and Robertson then knows, okay, I need to sort of play a little bit more defensive just so that we're not leaving 2 at the back at all times. Like, at least it's like 2.5 at the back. Because Robertson does get into the box, and I think in the final, like 2 or 3 match days, he got a goal, I think, and he's gotten a couple assists as well. So it's similar to that sort of relationship. And obviously, like, you can probably name a lot of other right back, left back relationships where one would bomb forward and one would be a little bit more defensive.
Before you go on, the one that I wanted to mention, you were nearly right with the one that I had in my head, but that 14-15 Barcelona team with Dani Alves and Jordi Alba, I think that's more of what this resembles, because you know how Dani Alves like to come a little bit infield and almost play as that central midfielder, but Alba had the energy to get up and down and either see if he needed to defend more or he could overlap and score goals like you're talking about with Robertson. So, yeah, that's the one that springs to my mind when I think about
Yeah, that's
what this
actually
partnership resembles.
that's probably a little bit of a better one because Abidal was more defensive minded than Robertson, whereas Alba bombs forward more so than Abidal. But yeah, like it's similar to those sort of great fullback. I guess you can sort of say partnership to an extent because they do have to work in that sort of tandem. They can't both always bomb forward, otherwise you're exposing your centre backs. So I have them as my right back and left back. My centre backs, I have Matip because he has over the totality of the season, he has for me been a very good partner to Van Dijk, and I know that in recent weeks, Kanate has started playing the bigger games, I suppose, but he already made my third team as well. So to partner up Matip, I put Marquinhos in there, and I know that his attempt at a clearance was what led to one of Benzema's goals when they faced Real Madrid. But like I said, I don't want one moment or one game to define a player's whole season, even though from one perspective, you know how they used to, prior to Real Madrid winning their first Champions League when the second Galacticos era came in, they were saying Ronaldo isn't a big game player because he'd do it throughout the season, and then for those big games he would go pretty much missing. And you could, I guess, you could sort of say, how can you say that he's a winner when he goes missing for those big crucial games, those big crucial moments? So in that perspective, one moment or one game sort of could define your season, but I don't really want to do that because it's sort of I feel like it's a little bit unfair to do that to players. So, and we've seen Marquinhos play fantastic as well, like in big games. So, but over the totality of the season, I'd put him as a partner to Matip, and I think, would you agree that he probably is one of maybe there's a lot of great centre backs, but would you put him in the top 10, I suppose, centre backs, like overall, like not necessarily this season, but like maybe over the past 2 or 3 seasons, would you put him as a top 10
in the world right now?
Yeah.
Oh, very comfortably. And,
yeah, and
he's. I'll say more later. Go on.
Well, and look, like we saw Silva leave the toxic environment of PSG, and he picks up a Champions League straight off the bat. Maybe Marquinhos needs to leave, and he could probably walk into any top team, really.
Oh, easily.
So. That's
but they've just re-signed Mbappe. So if I was Marquinhos, I'd probably at least stay for another season, because I think that PSG team, while they capitulated, they're still a really good team and should be challenging for a Champions League.
Yeah,
they just need to make it work.
I think if Ramos can, because he played almost no games this season, I think if Ramos can be fit and partner up Marquinhos, and if he can show, I guess, at least half of the form or half of that tenacity that he showed at Real Madrid, I think they could be a force to contend with. Like that partnership of Ramos and Marquinhos, that could be frightening next season. But I guess time will tell whether there's more problems or there's bigger problems there, because I think I don't really rate their midfield when I compare it to other midfields, to be honest.
I agree.
But look, we'll get into that, I guess, when we're closer to the opening of the season in like 2 months' time. Moving along, I got Rodri as my holding mid. again, you could easily put Casemiro there, or even Fabinho. Like those three, I guess Fabinho, Rodri, and Casemiro, they're sort of interchangeable with each other. They both offer a lot, but yeah, I think if I'm looking at it just as him as a player and his performances, I think he's deserving of that second team spot. In front of him, I've got Thiago and Bernardo Silva. So like you, Bernardo Silva's really impressed me, especially the fact that he's like transitioned from that winger to that centre mid, and he seems to complement De Bruyne very, very well. Like they seem to have a good understanding in there.
Yeah.
And in front of them, I have Mane, Kane, and Son. So those are my front three. And Kane, like we discussed this, I think in the last podcast, where Kane. Okay, firstly, Tottenham didn't start well at all. Kane had the whole transfer debacle sort of on the front pages. We know how terrible the media can be, especially when it comes to football and in England, and how much that can influence a player's, I guess, psyche. So and he got pretty much no rest after the Euros, and we also saw the demise of Maguire as well. But I guess there could be other things that are behind that, like not just the fact that he got very little rest after the run of the Euros, because there's other players that there's other English players that ended up doing really well after the Euros, like Declan Rice or Bukayo Saka or Phil Foden. But yeah, Kane didn't have a great start to the season, but he had a tremendous end to the season. And Son as well, like he's been more consistent from start to end because he was getting goals even at the start, but especially under Conte, like those two had a resurgence, and it's similar to, I guess, that they're showing that partnership that they had when Mourinho was coaching them last season. Like him, Kane and Son were just they were that duo that were just absolutely killers. And Mane, look, he actually has, for me, an argument to be in the first team, considering that he had a very good second half of the season, and he had a much better second half of the season than his, would you say counterpart, or I guess colleague is the other word, but like and I'll give this away, Salah obviously made my first team, but that you could easily change Mane and Salah around for first team, second team. For me, considering the Salah since the AFCON he's been a no-show. As a neutral, as a non-Liverpool fan, he's been a no-show since then. He hasn't turned up in the big games. He hasn't really contributed with many goals. You might know this better. Like how many goals has he actually scored since AFCON? Has it been like 3 or 4? Something like that? 5?
I'm not sure. I think it'd be a few more than that because he scored penalties as well, and he's been somewhat steadily scoring in recent weeks.
Yeah, but
the thing with Salah, he's not playing what he did at the start of the season, but that level at the start of the season was unreal. Like his level, and I don't think Mane ever got to that peak. He's never played at a level where I would say, wow, Sadio Mane has been unreal for the last 2 months. But Mo Salah was at that level at the start of the seasons. When we're talking about that, that's probably why Mo Salah will be above Sadio Mane in my team of the year selections. Yeah, and the numbers as well.
But
because Mo Salah led the league in goals and assists, which is a pretty incredible achievement.
Yeah, but the only thing is that I think Mane has led, especially since transitioning to a number 9, he's led that line a lot better than Salah or even Diaz. Diaz had a better second half of the season than Salah as well in terms of impact.
I agree with both.
But yeah, both. Like Mane is just, he seemed to be at the forefront of everything that Liverpool did well in this second half of the season since transitioning to a number 9, and it's unfortunate that he misses out on that first team spot. But I think over the totality of the seasons, and I have to obviously put him in the second team. But because I'm trying to weight the start of the season equally to the end of the season, whereas if you weight the end of the season like 1.5 times better or 2 times better, then obviously Mane would get into the first team. But they're both rated 1-1 for me, so that's my 11.
Yeah, that's solid. A lot of crossover, like you said, but yeah, I can't complain with that. That's second team at all.
I don't think we
all
can
right.
complain with any of the teams really. Like third team, maybe like
Yeah,
what
I
there
know.
could be some shout outs. Like for instance, I don't have Rice in any of the teams. So and he could
Yeah,
have maybe got in over Pedri, for instance, in my third team. But yeah.
there's there's a lot of shout outs we could give, no doubt. Um, like I think of like a Rafael Leao at AC Milan. He's been fantastic. I think of even Haaland, who's had another statistically pretty good season, but he didn't really sniff any of the three teams. So, but yeah, I guess that's why we wanted to make it three teams, because then you can really go through. So you want me to give what I have of my first team?
Yeah, let's hear your first team. I think give me a little bit of a break from talking. My mouth has gone a little bit
Yeah,
dry.
exactly. Yeah, so I'll give you the 9 players, and then we'll have the 4 for the 2 spots at the end, and we'll really go through it. But goalkeeper, obviously, seeing as though he hasn't been mentioned yet, Allison. I've just been so impressed by, I guess, not necessarily the revolutionization of that goalkeeper position, but he plays it differently to any goalkeeper that I've seen uh, play in my time of intently watching football. Because and it's obviously the system he plays in, but the system that he plays in calls upon him to do work. He's got to do a lot of important work. It's not work like collecting crosses. While obviously, if you play a deep block, that's very important work for that kind of goalkeeper. But he has to do the work of, hey, we're gonna trust that if we let an attacker go in 1-on-1 against you, then we're going to trust you to get the better of that duel, which is extremely risky. But the amount of times he has, to quote, to saved Liverpool this season is truly staggering. I know we were talking about a couple of weeks ago about that thing that I think we both read about how he was far and away the best goalkeeper in 1v1 situations this season. Uh, um, and I kind of like that. I like that he doesn't need to look like a goalkeeper all the time, if you know what I mean. Like sometimes goalkeepers can be caught up in doing like looking like goalkeepers, like making these sort of saves that are spectacular and technically great. But Allison, I think, just does it so differently in terms of staying on his feet for so long, never really committing to ground until he absolutely knows that um, where the ball's going, and the way he stands up and just blocks spaces, it's really a nightmare for attackers to try and get past him. If they do get past the other guy who I've got in my first team in Virgil van Dijk, because like I've said this season, I love the way the Liverpool have sort of flipped the balance of what you'd see from a traditional team, in that they have a fantastic defensive record, but they ask their defenders to do a lot of important work. They ask Van Dijk to cover a lot of space. They ask Van Dijk to be the last line of defence, but and very often do it. And then if you add onto it the range of passing that he can show, those drilled balls from that left centre back position out to Mo Salah on that right wing, that is just such a great out ball and was so effective, particularly for, again, probably the first 2/3 of the season. And then you go into the stability he gives Liverpool. I mean, the biggest compliment you can put upon him is Liverpool missed him for all of last season, and they were not a team anywhere near the level that they've shown this season. So he comes back from an ACL, and straight away Liverpool are one of the best teams in Europe again. So that's high praise indeed for him. And that goes into the argument I have for another player who why they got the holding midfield role, and that's Casemiro. Because the thing that swayed me with Casemiro was what we saw at the Etihad in that first leg against Man City without him in the team. And for me, that was just like, wow, this guy's so important to the whole team. I kind of already knew it, but that was like, geez, like if you took a Fabinho out of Liverpool, Henderson comes in and I think does a decent enough job. I mean, Fabinho's fantastic, but I think Henderson could do that job. Similar to a Rodri and a Fernandinho replacement. Now, you could say, hey, that's because Real Madrid's level of replacement isn't quite as high, but at the same time, I just think it's the workload that Casemiro gets through, the way he can clog up and make a back three. But he doesn't just make a back three by going in between his centre backs. He'll go to the sides of them and clog up channels down there, and he'll go and help fullbacks, and he'll go put in these big tackles when his team needs it. As we saw in the Champions League final, he's a physical beast in there, can cover so much ground so quickly. So for me, that's why he got into the first team, just because of that stark contrast that game showed me. And then you were talking about it in your second team, and it might seem a little bit double standard-ish for me to have Diaz in second team, but this guy I had to put in first team, and I had to have Marquinhos in my first team. And like I said, after we reviewed the PSG Real Madrid second leg, I was so heartbroken that it was him who made the mistake. Because anytime I've seen him this season, he's been imperious. He's been such a great leader, just stepped in. Because remember as well, like obviously Chelsea lost Thiago Silva at the start of last season. And that's a big leadership role that he had to take on board. And he stepped into it effortlessly while still maintaining such high standards of play. Just probably for me, for most of the season, every time I saw him, he was either on the same level as Virgil van Dijk or maybe the best centre back in the world. So I know that the hashed clearance can leave a bitter taste, but I couldn't get over what I'd seen from the eye test in how good this guy had been for club and country this season. So I had to put him in my first team. And then at right back, and I took liberties with this, but we all know that he started as a right back and he can comfortably play right back, and that's João Cancelo, who doesn't have the same kind of like assist numbers like the Liverpool fullbacks, but his ability on the ball is not very far off Trent. He can play very similar passes. I remember an outside of the foot cross for Sterling, I think against Everton in a Premier League game. It was very reminiscent of the Modric ball for Rodrigo against Chelsea. So that just kind of shows you this guy has a central midfielder's quality in a fullback's body, and the physicality really impresses me with this guy. I think he's a better physical defender than Trent. I think City's system helps him somewhat in that it's more. I feel like it's a bit more balanced defensively, more containing players, because when he gets to play one side and Walker gets to play the other side, then that's very formidable. Whereas Liverpool leave a lot more spaces, but obviously he's also a huge part of why it's so formidable, because he is such a good defender as well as being such a creative player. Could score goals, could score spectacular goals. We saw one, I think, at St. James's Park where he drove the ball through midfield and then cut back onto his right foot and blasted one in the top corner. So thoroughly impressed by him this season. He's been fantastic for the champions of England and the best defence in England as well, and he was a major part of that. And then at left back, I have Theo Hernandez from AC Milan, who I just think has been a little bit like Cancelo, actually. A lot of the things that impress me about Cancelo have impressed me about Theo Hernandez. And a little bit of what impresses me about Trent as well. Hernandez has almost played as AC Milan's best creator at times. Does it in a little bit of a different way to Trent, in that him in that AC Milan team, he's kind of the tactical system wants him to drive the ball through the heart of midfield, so he makes a lot of underlapping runs. Trent will take up those positions, but will more than often than not look to pass the ball from there. Whereas Hernandez can drive the ball through the heart of a midfield or defence. And then if he gets into a position to deliver, he can deliver. So, and the physicality jumps out at you. And the goal against Atalanta a couple of weeks back just jumps out at you as well. A goal of the year contender. And every time I've watched AC Milan this season, which would probably be close to 10, 12 times, he's been the guy that you look at straight away and it's like, wow, this guy is some player. And if only Real Madrid hadn't let him go, because while I think Ferland Mendy's a pretty good left back, this guy is a different level. And it'll be interesting to see if some of the huge clubs in Europe want to have a go at him this summer, or whether he'll stay at AC and try to build something there. But he's been the most impressive fullback I've seen in Europe this season. Now, yes, his team didn't get past the group stage of the Champions League, but I just think in terms of fullbacks, he's given the most, and he's been sensational this season. So I had to put him in that first team. In the midfield, obviously I've already mentioned Casemiro, so just playing, and the shape can change depending on which two of the four players that we're going to discuss get in. But the first starter I had to have was Luka Modric. I'm sure he's in your first team as well, so I don't want to go too far into it with him. But I think the highest compliment I gave him is just how intelligent a footballer is, just how, and it's nitty gritty things. Like I think I used the example at the Etihad against City, where his team just needed him to track in and go and fill up a space, and he did it. And City weren't able to attack, and then City was sort of had them on the ropes, and it was Modric who put in that big tackle that landed at, I think, Mendy's feet to cross for Benzema's first goal. So he just has this sense, which obviously a lot of experience and being a supremely intelligent footballer gives you. And then obviously just to do it at this age and have a sort of renaissance this late in your career is truly remarkable. What a great performance from Luka Modric this season. And then very obviously in front of him, Kevin De Bruyne. Best goal scoring season, I think, of his career in any league. But just the jewel in that Man City crown, that Man City team, so good. And he just, I don't know, what can you say about him that we haven't said already? He's just a joy to watch. Maybe the best pure footballer in the world at the moment. I mean, Benzema would have an argument, but this guy can do everything technically. He's supremely intelligent, takes up the right spaces, shows remarkable leadership, was integral in City's fight back on the last season as well, and just has this will as well as this skill that I mean, if he plays to this level, he'll always be in the first team. So I'm sure you'll give us more points on Kevin De Bruyne when you mention him in your first team. As you will the next guy, because it's an obvious decision again, and it's Karim Benzema, who has, and as I've litigated ad nauseum, just a historical individual Champions League season, a historical season in general, for a player to reinvent himself in the way he has, because he was always the Robin, maybe the B Robin to Ronaldo's Batman at Real Madrid, but the way he's been able to fill the role of Batman and honestly, for my eyes, do it in a more attractive way than Ronaldo was ever able to do it. The leadership that I want to touch on this season, obviously most of the time captain of Real Madrid, with Marcelo not playing too much, but the way he's brought along Vinicius with him, him and Modric have made such a fantastic sort of experienced partnership, which I'm sure Casemiro and Kroos were a big part of as well. But those two in particular look to always be plotting and scheming about how to make Real Madrid win the games that they needed to win, and they're champions of Europe mainly because of this guy. This guy has Uh, I don't know if anyone can. France would have to absolutely implode in the group stage of the World Cup, and he would have to be a key part of that French team that would do that for him not to win the Ballon d'Or, because he has been out of this world this season. So they're all my 9 selections so far. So I don't know if you want to give us your team or if you want to go straight into the 4 names I have for the last 2 positions, and then the other 2 will be in second team.
Well, let's see if I give my team and my reasoning for it, if that maybe convinces you then to put those 4 players into their respective spots. So, like you, I got Alice as my goalkeeper. And I think you touched on a lot of what I was going to say, but his one-on-one keeping has been absolutely insane. And I mentioned it earlier where even Arteta said that like the difference was in the boxes. And the difference was in the boxes because Liverpool have a fantastic goalkeeper, and like the majority of the games that I watched for Liverpool was firstly the Arsenal games, which there was like 3 or 4 in this half of the season, because it was the Carabao Cup and then the league game, and then obviously like towards the end of the season I was starting to watch some of their bigger games. But it's not in those one-on-one situations. It's not just that he saves a one-on-one, but he also just makes his presence really big and really felt, that it sort of intimidates that striker that's running down on him, and it forces them to miss. So sometimes he's not even having to save the chance. Sometimes he's just forcing them to miss, which they end up. Cause I think there was one chance by either Saka or Odegaard. I think they completely miss when they were one-on-one. But yeah, like his goalkeeping has been insane this season, and him and Edison, for instance, they're obviously the 1 and 2 for Brazil. I think Alisson has been edging it for Brazil, but I think that I would like to see how Edison does in those situations, because I haven't seen him being put in those situations because of the way that City play compared to the way that Liverpool play. Like Alisson is called upon a lot more, so we see him pull off these saves a lot more, and we see his ability a lot more. Whereas with Edison, we really only see his range of passing, to be honest. With Courtois, yes, we see his shot-stopping ability, especially in this final where he was really called upon. But again, I'll go back to my point where, if I was basing it on the final, Courtois would go ahead of Alisson, because it's similar to now what I said. Alisson wasn't really called upon in this final, whereas Courtois was called upon time and time and time again. It seemed like every 5 or 10 minutes at certain points in the game, Courtois was called upon, and he would obviously have an argument for being in Team 1. But I think, over the totality of the season, Alisson has been absolutely immense. Like he's been like an absolute rock. My back 4, and it's you didn't have Walker in any of your 3 teams, did you?
No.
Yeah, I have him as my preferred right back. And that game against that second leg against Madrid, I'm not sure Real Madrid come back if Walker plays the full 90. Especially for their first goal. Was that was the cross that came over the top, and then Benzema put it across the box on that far post, because Cancelo came in and played right back. I'm not sure Walker gets beaten on the back post, or at least he's quicker to recover. And he has been absolutely immense for Man City, and the way that Man City play as well. And I mentioned in one of our other podcasts, like for me personally, I can't have De Bruyne and Trent in the same team because they both occupy the same attacking spaces, whereas Walker doesn't do that. So him and De Bruyne complement each other in that way. So not only is he defensively much better than Trent, but I think he does also offer those. I've seen him, and we've seen him do those bombarding runs down the line as well. The sort of Dani Alves-esque runs in that 08-09 season. But yeah, like I have him as my right back, and then I have Diaz and Van Dijk as my two centre backs, and we don't really need to talk too much about them. They've been, especially Van Dijk, he's been an absolute rock for Liverpool, and you just need to go back to last season and compare it to this season. The difference in the defense with Van Dijk, he is the biggest player for you guys. I think you guys can afford to lose Mane and Salah this summer, but you can't afford to lose Van Dijk. He's going to be, I think if he was in any team, he would be the hardest player to replace.
That's
yeah.
That's actually a great question. Like to pose, like, would you rather lose both Mane and Salah or Van Dijk? That would be a really tough one to answer.
Yeah, and I think there's a much bigger abundance of attacking players, and look, like an example is Luis Diaz. He's slotted into your team immediately. He's displaced Firmino and Jota, and Jota was he displaced Firmino. So, and then Luis Diaz came in as now the number 3 choice, and could arguably be the choice. Like if you're writing down your team sheet, he could probably be like, you'd probably write his name down maybe even before Salah and Mane's. Like if you compare the season from when Diaz came in to the end of the season.
Not quite yet. But I get your point. Your point is still valid, but not quite yet. Not above Mane's.
Well, let's see how he goes, I guess, with a full season under his, and like not just a full season, but a pre-season as well with Liverpool. Like, so let's see how he goes next year. But look, maybe next podcast we can do our awards for the year, so individual awards. He would probably, I'll give it away for myself. He'd probably be the signing of the season. I think there would be no arguments there. Like I'd have to really have a look who could challenge for that, but probably the signing of the season. But yeah, look, Van Dijk and Diaz, and I think that is an excellent partnership. You have a Premier League winner, and then you have Premier League runner-up, and a Premier League and a Champions League runner-up, but also an FA Cup winner and a Carabao Cup winner. So like. And I think those two have been extremely important to their respective sides in a defensive manner. And then I got Cancelo at left back, and you went into quite enough detail into him in regards to his versatility and the way he plays, and I think he's a really, really intelligent player, and I think over the next couple of seasons, you could see a Philip Lahm type development where Guardiola starts utilizing him as a central mid or a defensive mid. I think that could be the next stage of his development, and then you could bring in a different left back. I think Cancelo has that in his locker. I don't know if you agree with me on that one or not.
I think that's a fair call. Probably not quite yet, and mainly for the reason that you mentioned at the end, they need to get a different left back, and you can't be playing with Zinchenko if he's your only option. If you want Cancelo in the midfield, I think they'll need to go out and get someone better in there. But if they do, then I think you'll see something similar. I think Guardiola does like doing things like that. So
yeah,
he's got an opportunity to, by buying a left back, he might do. That's a
Yeah,
good shout.
Guardiola likes to he likes his players to be able to play multiple positions. It seems so, especially like those midfielders slash defenders. Like he likes his defenders to be able to. No, his midfielders to be able to play defense as well. Like we've seen that with Fernandinho. We saw that with Yaya Toure at Barca. With
Javi Martinez.
Mascherano as well.
Yeah, Mascherano as well.
Yeah, so we've seen him utilize players in different positions and then be able to play multiple roles, and it gives you a little bit of extra cover when it comes to injuries and things like that. For my defensive mid, I got, I guess, the third one that's left, Fabinho. I think he's been very important to Liverpool, and you gave a shout to Casemiro, and yeah, like in terms of his role or his importance, and 100% agree with that. But I still think as a player, it's such a close call with that one. It's similar to the Alisson Edison debate with Brazil, where
yeah.
But like at least with Fabinho and Casemiro, you can actually play both of them in the center of mid, whereas you can't play two goalkeepers. So yeah, I'd still edge him just ahead of Casemiro. And then obviously you got your two midfielders in front of him in Modric and De Bruyne, who we both agreed on with there. And honestly, I think this latest achievement sort of cements it. I think Modric has been the best midfielder over the past 10 years, ahead of Xavi and ahead of Iniesta, because I think his play style is a combination of both Xavi and Iniesta. So he can dribble like Iniesta and keep the ball at his feet like him, but he can also spray passes and keep the game ticking like a Xavi. And I've seen him play against that Spain squad as well. I think Croatia even beat them like 1-0. I think it was I'm not sure if it was the 2012 Euros, or we either beat them 1-0 or we lost them 1-0, but I think then we beat them 1-0 maybe in the 2016, so I guess when they were on their last legs. But I think Xavi still might have been in the squad. But like there was that game there where like we beat them, and Modric was just all over the place, like dictating the play, and he came up against, I'm pretty sure, Xavi and Iniesta, and he showed that he can play against both of them on the field. So for me, the best Croatian player of all time, and also the best midfielder of the past 10 years, and at 36 years old as well. I think even now he can walk into any team and be a starter. Even at 36, 37, he could be a starter, and he's a free agent now. So unless he signs a 1-year extension at Real, he could actually walk into any top team. And I doubt that you have any arguments there, because he still has the legs to run, still has the legs to close down, still has the ability to play with the ball at his feet. And then I've already given my I think it was after. Well, yeah, go on.
Yeah, just before you move off the Modric point, the last 10 years, definitely. I think the only other sort of midfielder who can maybe even be in the argument in the last 10 years is N'Golo Kante. But then you look at Modric topping it off with a 5th Champions League crown and being a key part of that. I know he didn't have the World Cup, but he made a World Cup final with Croatia, which is about as good as you can do. So in terms of the last 10 years, the only other one that springs to mind is N'Golo Kante. In terms of the argument is always there, and I always grapple with, it's not so much Xavi, but Iniesta versus Modric. Xavi, for me, while an all-time great, a fantastic player, maybe a touch overrated for me, just because he's a little bit limited in what he does. But when you put him in the right system, like Guardiola did, he just becomes a world beater. Kind of like what Busquets has done for the last 10 years as well. Look, if I saw Busquets playing in another system, I would put money down that he would not be the player that he is, because that Barcelona system just helps him so much. But I mean, how much is a system versus player? You know, that's that whole argument. But when you're talking Iniesta, I think he's a player who could definitely translate to any club, any team, and play fantastically well. So peak Iniesta versus peak Modric is an argument for me, but obviously they didn't peak at the same times because Iniesta was just a touch before Modric. Iniesta was around probably that '08 Spain winning team right through to, I guess, at least the 2012 Euro winning team. So Euro to Euro, that was probably Iniesta's peak. And then Modric, obviously, the three-peat was probably his peak. So, and then culminating in a Ballon d'Or. So that one is a really good, always will be a really good argument because Iniesta was lucky enough to play on a great Spain team, but he also was a big reason that Spain team was so great. While Modric has accomplished unbelievable things for his club and somewhat his country, but they're not just because it's Croatia against Spain. It's harder. I think when you're a country of Croatia's side, I think a World Cup final is almost like winning a World Cup. That's what the kind of achievement it should be. So, yeah, I just wanted to touch on that argument because that's one I grapple with a lot. But for the last 10 years, yeah, Luka Modric has been the best central midfielder in the world.
Yeah, I think in terms of play style, him and Iniesta draw more of a similar comparison than him and Xavi. But that's why I said, I think he's Iniesta and Xavi combined. He can do what they both do best. But in terms of just eye test and the way that they manipulate the ball and they dribble with the ball, very similar, Iniesta and Modric. And just on the Kante point, look, I'm obviously going off of memory here of the World Cup final. I thought that Kante didn't have that great of a game in the World Cup final because I thought Croatia's midfield was superior, but we lost the game in other points of around the field and in other moments. But I actually thought our midfield did well against that Pogba, Kante, and who was the third midfielder?
Would have been Griezmann playing in the 10, wouldn't it?
No, there was another midfielder.
Or was it Matuidi as a sort of
left
midfielder?
I think it was Matuidi. I think it was Matuidi who was in that centre mid as well, alongside Kante and Pogba. But I think Kante even got subbed off. I'm not sure what, albeit I think he might have been carrying an injury into that final. But going from memory, I'd need to watch the game again. As much as I don't want to watch that game again because of how painful it is to relive it. But going off of memory, I thought our midfield was superior to theirs or played much better than theirs. But obviously, there's other places where they were more superior. So I have to sort of push back on the Kante argument, although he has been very, very good. Obviously, he has a World Cup to his name, but he doesn't have as many, I guess, of those club trophies to his repertoire. But it's similar to that Lewandowski point that I made a while ago. You put Lewandowski in any of the other teams, and he has a European, like a Euro to his name or a World Cup to his name if you put him in any other team. But because he plays for Poland, he's never going to achieve anything on the international stage, unfortunately. Similar to Messi to an extent. He's won a Copa America with Argentina, and that was only last year. But Messi, I believe he had the chance to play for Spain, and had he have chose to play for Spain instead of Argentina, he would have had a World Cup and two Euros to his name. But unfortunately, he's never going to have, even though Argentina's team is a lot better than Croatia's and Poland.
Let's not talk like Argentina are a minnow of world football. I mean, they've won 2 World Cups. Yeah. I think that's the difference. If Croatia ever do break through, then maybe you can start looking at them in a different light. But those countries that are small countries that have never won a World Cup, even a country like Holland or the Netherlands, they're always around there. But because they haven't broken through and they don't have the biggest population and all those resources, it's going to be very hard. Even to Portugal, someone like that.
Yeah,
it's as much history as it is the names on your team sheet. Belgium would be a perfect example for that because they've recently had a golden generation but never been able to break through and win a major trophy yet.
Yeah,
so that history weighs heavy.
Belgium's probably the best modern day example to Messi's Argentina, I think. If you consider all of the players that they've had. But I think Argentina, their biggest problem is that they were missing a defense. but they had all the attacking talent and midfield talent to choose. Midfield, not so much, but attacking talent, 100%. Like they had Aguero, Tevez, Messi, Higuain as well. Like they had an abundance of attacking talent, and I guess they had Mascherano in the midfield as well. But yeah, they were lacking a little bit. Whereas Belgium, I think on paper, they probably had a better team than Argentina has had during Messi's more senior years. Because Messi's Argentina, when he was 18 at the 2006 World Cup, that's probably the best Argentina team that he's played for.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. The problem is, like, there were a lot of countries who had the best teams that they've had in recent memory in that 06 World Cup.
Yeah.
That was just a fantastic World Cup, full of golden generations.
100%. Even Australia, that was their golden generation.
I know. Yeah.
But look, we're sort of going on a tangent.
Yeah, I know.
So I got Modric and then I got De Bruyne partnering him. And I think in one of the previous podcasts, I said if I was to have my time again and based on my physical similarities to De Bruyne, I would model my game, or like I try to model my game as much to his as well. Having a left foot, right foot, being able to drive with the ball through midfield, break those lines, scoring by arriving late in the box, crossing as well. Like he has everything, and I love the way that he sort of whips the ball when he's crossing it as well. Like, and he always takes it early when he crosses as well. So he always catches the defense off guard, because he never takes that first touch to take it more to the byline. He always hits it first time, and I just love the way that he strikes. I think for me, he's probably the best striker of the ball in modern day football. And yeah, like probably even though I just gave Modric his praise as being the best for me, the best midfielder, De Bruyne is a different sort of mold of a midfielder. Like Modric is sort of that more classical one, whereas De Bruyne is that more modern one. But yeah, like they would complement each other extremely well.
Yeah, and De Bruyne is at his peak right now. So when we talk about Modric being the best of the last 10 years, it doesn't mean he's the best every year. I would put De Bruyne ahead of Modric this season as far as eye test and everything, but Modric is still probably the second best, as our team suggests. So
there's arguments there.
You would still put Modric above De Bruyne?
I think so, but they offer different styles. It's so hard to compare them. Like you made we last I think a week or two ago we made the comparison of De Bruyne to Lampard and Gerrard, and I think you said that he's probably more similar to Gerrard than Lampard. Whereas Modric, I made the comparison to Iniesta, that he's more similar to Iniesta, and Iniesta isn't similar to either Lampard or Gerrard, but he's still considered one of the greatest midfielders potentially ever, at least of the past 10, 15 years, as similar to Modric. Like, but again, different styles, and even for instance, Andrea Pirlo. He's a completely different style to De Bruyne, but more similar to Modric. So yeah, it's so hard to compare players. Similar to comparing players from different eras as well. Like, how would they fare in the modern era, or how would our modern day players fare in like the 80s or the 70s or the 60s under a sort of different rule set, under probably more harsher physical systems and stuff, because we've seen some of the tackles that they put in then, and how would our players fare under that more physical game? Like, who knows?
Well, physicals, it depends what kind of physical you're talking.
I think more.
I don't want to get too
body contact physical. Yeah.
But of course, nowadays they run a lot further and a lot harder.
Yes.
And change direction a lot more. They're more athletic.
Yes, 100%.
So physically, yeah.
And then my front three, I have Salah, and I've already mentioned this before with like the Mane Salah comparison towards the end of the season, but I think over the totality of the season, and even with one of our podcasts that I mentioned with was it with Matthias? Was it the Man City preview? I think I mentioned that Salah, even though he's not in form, and he hasn't been in form for quite a while now, he still offers that threat. Like, you still need to put one definitely, but you still need to put two, maybe even three men around him to sort of back up your main defender, because he still offers that threat. And if he doesn't give a goal, he's going to give an assist. And still, probably one of the best, I guess, attacking players over the last 2 or 3 seasons. And this season, he's gotten the Golden Boot for the Premier League. And had he not have had his dip, I think he would have got 30 goals in the Premier League. If he didn't go to AFCON, I think AFCON really, it ruined his momentum, and it not just from like a physical point of view, but also because it made him play more games, made him travel more, but also from a psychological perspective of losing the final. And then
that's the point I wanted to say. Not only going to AFCON and having to put the physical tax, but if he was able to win that, maybe we'd see a different story because the momentum.
So not only that, like, and we mentioned it, like, and it's a widely known, everyone knows it, losing to your teammate, and then also being knocked out of the World Cup qualifiers by your teammate as well. And was it that on penalties as well? Yeah. So having 2 international disappointments, I think in the space of 2.5 months, who knows how much of that played on his confidence and his psyche, not to mention the physical toll, because not only did like Liverpool as a team play in every single club game that they could have played this season, but then Salah also played in international games on top of that, and an international tournament, and he made a deep run to the final where it went to penalties. So he's played a lot of football. So who knows how much of a physical tax that took out on him. So, but I still put him in my first team. Benzema. Do we really need to say too much? And he actually really impressed me in the final, even though he didn't get his goal. He was playing those 1-2s with Vinicius, Valverde, Modric, Kroos, and he wasn't hanging onto the ball like a Giroud type player or a Lewandowski, like a number 9, where he'd get the ball with his back to goal and hold it up. He'd be trying to just immediately in one touch play it out to Vinicius or Valverde, and trying to get that counter attack rolling. And at one point in the game, I was thinking, has he misplaced one of those sort of first touches? And then immediately as I was thinking that, I think his first touch went to like when he tried to pass to Vinicius, I think it went to either Trent or to Kanate, and that was around the 60th or 70th minute. But yeah, he actually, despite not getting a goal, he actually played a very, very crucial role in the whole link-up play. And I have Vinicius as my left wing, and I actually had him in like 2 weeks ago when I first made this team. I think I originally had Mane. And then I changed him with Vinicius, and I did that 2 weeks ago as well. And I think that from if you just look at his stats, I think he has 21 goals and 21 assists or something like that over the totality of the season, both domestically and in Europe, the European competitions. And he has been extremely important to Real as well, not just the main guys of Modric, Kroos, Casemiro and Benzema, because he's sort of that outlet for them to relieve the pressure and to put pressure on, and then to put pressure onto the defenses, because he has that pace, he has that skill, that trickery, and he has a goal in him as well. And that link up between him and Benzema has been it's been extremely important as well for Real achieving what they have achieved. And yeah, he's made my first team, and he made it before the final.
Yeah, and for those reasons, I can't argue with it. I had him on my third team. Obviously, I just think it's maybe a season or two too soon to be a first team player. But your reasoning, especially seeing how they've won the Champions League now, I would personally, I'd put him as the second most important piece in that Real Madrid behind Benzema. To be quite honest, and that's not taking anything away from Courtois or Modric, but without a guy with the qualities that you talked about, this Real Madrid team wouldn't have gotten very far, because who else is going to do that job to get him behind, but do it to such a high level as he has this season with, like you say, 20 plus goals and 20 plus assists across all competitions. I thought last season, the way he played, particularly in the first leg, it wasn't the Bernabeu, it was Real Madrid's training ground. But the way he played in that quarterfinal against Liverpool, I thought was a little bit of an announcement that he was ready to take the next step. And then this season, he definitely took the next step, and he is now a bona fide star in European football, and he's looking to become the next superstar. Maybe join that group with Mbappe and Haaland as the next generation's sort of best players. So he's definitely had a breakout season. So I can't argue with him being first team, really. And that's a really strong first team, obviously, that you've selected. So I guess we need to go into the four players who I have between the last two spots in each first and second team. The first one I think you had him third team, but I have Mbappe as a candidate to be here. Look, PSG losing to Real Madrid, if I could put a percentage of blame to him as to why that happened, it would be 0% or a decimal point of a percent, because he was fantastic across the two legs. That goal he scored in the last minute at the Parc des Princes to put PSG a goal up in the tie. Great goal, showed off his quality. Obviously, slaloming between, or getting between two players, being so direct in getting to the goal with that blistering pace of his, and now that physicality that he continues to add. He continues to maybe not get bigger, but appear bigger at least. He looks to get stronger every season. I don't. I think I know he's done it in Ligue 1 in the French league, but he's still got around 40 goals for the season. I think he's finished at 39 in all competitions. He continues to be not only one of the best young players in the world, but one of the best players in the world. So when you're a star of that level, I had to put him in contention for first team at least. Along with the next player is Mo Salah. I don't know. The more I think about Mo Salah, not that we weren't able to finish either the Premier League or the Champions League with one of those trophies. I guess it's not really an argument, because the other guys didn't really end up with that either. But the numbers don't stack up well next to the other guys. I mean, he finished with 31 goals across all competitions, and obviously Premier League's leader in assists as well. But an argument for Mo Salah, I've got to say, is the level that he got to at the start of the season, which has only been topped by Benzema in the second half of the season. For me, I think Mo Salah's level was, apart from Benzema, the highest that any player had reached this season in that start of the season, because he was in blistering form. Remember those back-to-back weeks where he scored the solo goal against City, and then went on and scored another unbelievable goal against Watford, much in the same vein the next week. That just showed the absolute peak of what he was doing, and just sort of combining this sort of Messi-like ability with this physicality that he's always had. He's always been a super hard worker, super strong. he's always keen to take his shirt off after a goal because he works so hard on his body. But a supreme athlete, and I think that's something I always admire about these top-level players and what makes them top-level players. So I had to put him in contention. The other one might be a little bit controversial. I think you had him in your third team as well, but Christopher Nkunku has just impressed me to no end this season. Like we said, I believe Bundesliga Player of the Year. I believe he might have been top assist man in that competition as well as second top goal scorer. I believe he was. Patrick Schick was up there as well, but I'd have to look into that further. But I mean, 35 goals in 52 games in all competitions. It's scary to think that he's French because we already have Benzema as solidified in the first team. I've got Mbappe flirting with it, and I've got him flirting with it as well. So it could be an all French front line, and if he continues this form, you've got to think that he'll be a starter for that French World Cup side, which will be scary. But obviously, a deep run in the Europa League with Leipzig. Leipzig winning the domestic cup in Germany as well. I had to put him as a candidate because I've just been super impressed, and as well, he's played across a variety of positions this season. I've seen games where he's been the striker. I've seen games where he's been one of the wingers. I think early under Jesse Marsch at Leipzig, I think he was playing him as a central midfielder, and I've seen him play that role. I think in previous seasons as well. So he's one, like I say, impressed me to no end. Had to be a candidate. And the final one's interesting because I have an opportunity to set a precedent with the final one, and it's got to be Robert Lewandowski. And Robert Lewandowski, we know what he can do. It's probably not his best season ever, probably last season or the COVID sort of season where he should have won the Ballon d'Or. But he has scored 50 goals across all competitions. And the precedent to set here is, does 50 goals across all competitions in one of the top leagues get you an automatic spot in the first team? And that's the one I'm grappling with because in a lot of ways, and let's not forget the Bundesliga is a 34 game season. It's not a 38 game season. So he's scored more than a goal a game this season. I know he takes penalties, but so does Mo Salah, so does Karim Benzema. I'm almost tempted to say the precedent should be that 50 goals gets you into that first team, but I'm interested to know what your thoughts are on those four players that I've just mentioned.
Like from an individual perspective, like they're absolutely immense, especially like Nkunku and Lewandowski. The only thing is like Lewandowski, like Bayern faltered, and Leipzig did it in the Europa League. Like that's where they made their deep run, I suppose. But and then like Mbappe had he had a fantastic season as well. I think he got both top assists and top goal scorer in the French league, if I'm not mistaken. It's a difficult one. Like, but the only thing is like why Lewandowski can't be in the first team is because Benzema's there and they both occupy the same space. Like, so
yeah, I'd have to get very liberal with my formation.
Yeah,
it would probably be like a 4-2-2-2, like a Ralph Rangnick in that first team if Lewandowski does make it.
Yeah. Yeah, I just, for me, I think you also need to factor in not just their domestic performance, but also their Champions League runs as well, and how they did well in the Champions League, because that is the superior competition to the Europa League, and that's also why, like, for instance, I didn't have Declan Rice in any of my teams. Yeah, like I think I think Salah needs to be first team though.
Yeah, what you've just said has convinced me to put Nkunku second team. While I've been staggered by his season, but hopefully he keeps progressing and can get into that first team in coming seasons. But for those reasons, especially because it's not the Champions League, it is the Europa League. But he was fantastic in that competition, and that's probably the right level for Leipzig. And them going out to Rangers, I believe he scored a goal in each leg. I may be mistaken, but it's similar to the Mbappe situation. No fault of his own that his team didn't get through that. But yeah, I think the fact that he was the only one who if they'd won the Europa League, it would have been a much tougher one. But I guess for those reasons you've just given me, I've put him in the second team. So you think Salah should be first team over, I guess. Look, I'm leaning towards Lewandowski in the first team just for 50 goals and setting that precedent because it's staggering and I don't think it's something that should ever be normalised, a player scoring 50 goals in a season. I know you might have qualms with this, but that season that Luka Modric won the Ballon d'Or, while he was fantastic that season, for me, he shouldn't have won it because Ronaldo was still the best player for those big competitions of that season. And look, my inkling was that Real Madrid wanted to have the Ballon d'Or winner, so they pulled a few strings. And because Ronaldo left for Juventus, they didn't want him having it in possession at Juventus. So that's my inkling, unofficial, obviously. But
yeah, but
I think he scored.
Yeah, but my pushback on that is like if the argument is always that like the top goal scorer wins the Ballon d'Or, then no midfielders are ever going to get it, and no defenders ever.
It's not. It's my pushback on that is it's not the top goal scorer. It's something staggering like 50 goals in a season in the hardest competitions. That's just insane. Like for me, that should never be normalized. High 30s, that's fine. That's a unbelievable season. High 30 goals, even for a striker. But when we start getting to 5-0 plus, that should we should never take that for granted. That's incredible.
Okay, I get your argument, but how are you gonna do your formation for the first team if you put Lewandowski and Benzema in there?
It would be
who's in your team in total?
So I guess Kevin De Bruyne will play as sort of a left attacking midfield, and Salah will play as the right attacking midfield. You know that 4-2-2-2 formation.
Yeah.
Or, oh no, you couldn't do that. But yeah, it'll be a 4-2-2-2. Just because Benzema and Lewandowski, it will work because Benzema can drift out wide to pick up the ball, but you would never start Benzema as a winger. So I guess it has to be a 4-2-2-2. But yeah, I think after talking it through, I think Mbappe will be the striker on the second team. If he'd gotten to 50 goals, it would have been interesting because then you could have an argument to say it's the fifth best league in Europe he did it in. So that would be a bit of an argument. But he didn't even get to 50. So I think I feel comfortable with putting him second team striker and then Salah and De Bruyne just behind Benzema and Lewandowski.
Do you have Kane in any of your teams?
Kane was third team.
He was third team. Okay.
Yeah. Just because that start of the season I held against him a little bit. And I know you factored in the Euros, but he wasn't very good in the Euros either. But the second half of the season has been unreal.
Okay, so give your complete second team, give your complete first team, since you're decided now.
So, second team is Courtois, and then Trent, Rudiger, Diaz, Koulibaly, Robertson, Nkunku, Rice, Silva, Son, and Mbappe up front. And then first team is Alisson, Cancelo, Marquinhos, Van Dijk, Theo Hernandez, Modric and Casemiro, Salah and De Bruyne, and then Benzema and Lewandowski.
Great team with great players. I just feel like because you're going for a non-traditional formation, it just seems a little bit imbalanced to me. But
no, it's not ideal. But I think it's enough to work.
Yeah, look, we didn't put the criteria that it also needs to be functional, I suppose. So
I guess we said last time we were talking about it needs to be functional team, but I still see that as a functional team.
Yeah,
because like I said, if Benzema's starting up front, he can drift to the left hand side and offer that width. as he often likes to do, as we saw in the Champions League. Theo Hernandez can make underlapping runs, and De Bruyne can almost play as a 10 anyway, with Salah offering the width at the other side. It's just, as they're lined up on the piece of paper, it doesn't look ideal. But I think these players are so smart, their movements off each other would make it work anyway.
Yeah, like it's functional in the sense that it's not like 10 attacking players and one goalkeeper.
Yeah, exactly.
But I guess it's not it's not traditional. I suppose we could put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. But that's where I landed on. And I guess I set that precedent with Lewandowski. That was the toughest one because it's not stellar. They didn't win a champion. They didn't even go deep in a Champions League, and it was disappointing. But 50 goals in a season, I can't take that for granted. It's just incredible.
Yeah, and I guess like them not making it to the semis as a minimum, it's not really his fault, is it? Like you can't really put it down to one player. Like it was the team's performance overall, and I can't really remember him really like getting and missing too many chances against Villarreal either. Albeit I didn't watch the first leg and I watched some of the second leg, but I can't really. Can you really put him at fault, or is the midfield at fault, or is the defense at fault there? So, yeah,
tough one. Villarreal defended his spaces, exploited Bayern's lack of a great centre back. Ultimately, for me, that's why they fell short.
But it just wasn't Bayern's moment to go through. But yeah, it is what it is. Anything else to add?
Yeah, just before we finish, just kind of going back to the review of the final. Maybe, you know what, if Bayern had gotten through Villarreal, it may have been beneficial for Liverpool after all, because like we was talking about on the last pod, I think Bayern's route to the final made them believe somewhat a little bit more.
Wait, Real's route,
because
not Bayern.
Yeah, Real's route. It made Real Madrid themselves believe somewhat more because they'd come through the gauntlet and beaten the teams they had beaten. And I always maintain in the Champions League, I want to play the best teams. Maybe not in the group stage because I want to get out of the groups first, but in the knockout stage, give me the best teams that are available because that's the reason why we're playing in this competition. So if Liverpool had been forced to go through an Ajax initially in the quarters and a Bayern in the semis, then I think it would have battle tested them, made them believe a little bit more that they could get the job done. I think as well, not winning the league title, even though it was never ours, it kind of put the first bitter taste in Liverpool's mouth. So while I don't think they came into the final with a bad mindset, it maybe wasn't as strong and as joyous or jovial as it could have been in terms of belief that they could win the game. So I just thought that was an interesting point that I wanted to touch on before we go for tonight.
Hey, and also we didn't touch on this at the beginning, but you know how there was like a 36-minute delay to the final. Originally they said because Liverpool's bus was running late to the game. But it was the fans. And I think the official statement was because a lot of fans were trying to get in with fake tickets. So they were being turned back by those turnstiles because their tickets weren't being accepted. But how much of that whole delay do you think would have played on it? And just before I do give it over to you, before the final, I think Liverpool almost, from what I've seen, like the initial things what I've seen, like little tidbits of what I've seen, they seem to almost take a scientific approach to games and training and all that stuff. And I'm sure a lot of teams do in this day and age. But like I saw a photo with Trent, and he had like this whole contraption like attached to his head and his body. And it was like, apparently it was there to monitor his brain waves and his thinking when taking free kicks and set pieces, apparently. And if they're going that far to monitor brain waves and things like that, it sort of makes me think, do they then go as like to a certain extent to prepare for games where you need to have your dinner or your lunch intake at a certain time. You then have your warm up at a certain time. And I'll relate this to another thing that's not football related. I knew this one bodybuilder, and he used to tell me when he would compete, he would time his meals to the minute. So his dietary intake, he would time it to the minute so that he was getting his energy or his carbs or whatever at a specific time every single day, and he was then going to training like at that or at the exact same time every single day, so that everything would be planned out to the exact minute. Do you think then that the delay affected Liverpool more than Real? Because I assume Real are a little bit more liberal or a little bit more casual with their training and their methodology.
It's a good point. It's a good theory. You'd have to. I guess we'd both have to know the ins and outs of how Liverpool and Real Madrid do actually prepare for games. But my viewpoint is, if it's something that affects both teams, it's definitely no excuse that you can ever have, because it's not a disadvantage. The other team has to deal with it as well. But yeah, no, that's an interesting theory. It may well have been that fact, but if you watch the first half, you wouldn't say that, because I thought Liverpool were pretty clearly the better team, while maybe not playing to the intensity that Liverpool normally play. But that as well you can put down to the fact that it's a Champions League final and there's always at least a little bit of tension in the air. So, yeah, like I say, it's a good theory, but it's definitely not one they can use as an excuse, because both teams were disadvantaged to the same extent by that.
Yeah, I guess it just depends. Yeah, like we don't know the ins and outs of how methodically they prepare, but my assumption, like I said, is that, and based on like what I saw, especially with that Trent picture, is that Liverpool take a much more scientific approach to their preparation.
I think probably the better way to put it is a holistic approach. I don't think Klopp leaves any stone unturned. He'll use anything available. But like, you only have to listen to Klopp speak to know that he's not necessarily an analytics or a science guy per se. He is very much a feel and emotion guy, probably more so than that side, but he doesn't close his mind off to that kind of stuff. And I guess that's probably one of the things that makes him such an exceptional manager, that he is willing to explore every avenue to gain any little advantage, because he understands that's what it takes at the top level of European football. It's decimal points of percentages. It's not getting massively better. It's getting marginally better, but that's what makes the difference at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I'm sure you also heard the story that I think Liverpool used a psychologist or something, or psychiatrist for penalties. Yeah. So yeah. I think, like, while Klopp himself might not be that type of person, he hires people around him to extract every 0.1% that he can out of his players. So I think just looking from an outside perspective of someone who, we're making assumptions here, and based on, I guess, what we believe, cultural sort of, I guess you can say cultural stereotypes, or like we know that Spanish people tend to be a little bit more, I guess, laid back, and a little bit more casual, I suppose. And then you obviously have a German sort of approach, where they're very they're very efficient, and they look at every detail and everything like that. So it's I guess it's what's that argument? Is it like flair versus what's the other word? You probably know, but yeah, like you got your flair type player versus your
pragmatism, I guess.
Yeah, so who knows? Maybe there is something to it, because like you said, although Liverpool were more dominant in that first half, they didn't show that same intensity. So whether that was down to their preparation being offset a little bit, or them just having to play 63 games, and it's them just running on on steam or fumes for that last game of the season. Who knows what you could really put it down to? Or maybe Real just played out of their skins and they believed more as well because they had a harder run to the final. So yeah, who knows?
Yeah, I think another special Nev cultural stereotyping is a perfect place to leave this pod before we go deeper into that.
I was actually gonna leave it on apparently some breaking news, and you mentioned this player, I think a week ago, who would be a potential signing for Chelsea. Apparently, Ivan Perisic is in London for a medical at Tottenham. Yep.
Yeah. So.
Oh man, I don't want that to go through. I don't want him playing at bloody Tottenham.
I'm telling you, I think Tottenham will make the biggest leap next season. If everything goes all right with Conte, I think he'll attract that type of player. And there's others that I'd be looking at from Inter, mainly Milan Skriniar, who I think would instantly bolster that defence. No end. One of the best centre backs in the world for me, and could slot into that system because he's already played under Conte. So. Yeah, for me, Tottenham will make big waves if Conte's still there this summer with that Champions League football.
Yeah, and look, apparently they have 150 mil to spare as well this summer. So, their recruitment is what's going to lock Man United out of that top 4 spot. I think.
Well, and Man United being absolutely shambolic. We'll also do that, so exactly. That will be an interesting summer development story.
Yeah, so we'll obviously do more in depth of transfers over the coming weeks. So yeah, Caleb, it's if you've got nothing more to add, it's been an absolute pleasure.
I wish I could say the same. The first 40 minutes or so recapping what happened over the weekend wasn't a pleasure, but. The first and second team definitely. So yeah, definitely always appreciate coming on here talking about football with you. And I mean, there's worse things in life. So while the result wasn't perfect, like I say, always great to come on and talk about football with you, man.
Yeah, and look, we've finished the podcast by shitting on United. So. For a Liverpool fan,
at least there's that.
Yeah, that's got to put a smile on your face. So, Caleb, it's been a pleasure. And for everyone listening, thanks for coming and bye for now.